I am Professor Devesh Kishore, Program Coordinator for Postgraduate Diploma in Journalism and Mass Communication. This is the first session in the series of teleconferencing on journalism and mass communication. We are all experiencing changes in media scenario all over the world. Innovative methodologies are being used for communicating effectively to the masses. We have invited eminent media experts, educationists, researchers, and professionals to the studio for this session. I would like to welcome all of them on my behalf and on your behalf to this session. We have with us eminent media user, designer and planner Professor Abdul Wahid Khan, Vice Chancellor, Indira Gandhi Open University. We have Professor Kiran Karnik, Vice President, Discovery Channel, who has been using this media for educating the masses. We have Dr. R. Sreedher, Director, Electronic Media Production Center. Among the panelists, other is Dr. J.S. Yadav, Director, Indian Institute of Mass Communication. Now I will request Professor Abdul Wahid Khan to lead the discussion. Professor Abdul Wahid Khan.
If we look at the development of human societies, in fact, we find a very, very close relationship between the development of the forms of communication and the development of human societies. Right from the development of languages, the discovery of printing technology, discovery of radio, subsequently television, and today the convergence that we witness between the telecommunications, the information technology and television, and the result of that is unprecedented growth in the reach of mass media of all kinds, whether it's printed material, audio, video, and of course the combination in the form of multimedia communication. With every advancement, with every step, you find that technology is becoming all pervasive. You find that the technology is becoming miniaturized, and unlike many commodities such as onions and things of that nature, the cost of the technology is constantly coming down. Cost of communication information technology, which is basically behind the development in mass communication, journalism and mass communication. With the portability, the ruggedness of the equipment, the proliferation of software generating agencies, both in developed and developing part of the world, you find that there is a great deal of a specialization of different kinds of communication specialists. Today you have people who specialize in financial communication, in development communication, in educational communication, in religious communication, and of course I should not forget the entertainment communication, which is all very dominant all over the place. If media, as is the case, so pervasive, has such it has to have a major impact and influence on societal values. There's no question about it. No matter what form of communication you use to communicate information, communication is one way of creating and establishing societal norms and values. And if today you find not only the reach of media has increased, but also there is a proliferation of so many different kinds of media now reaching people. People have, unlike the yesteryears, today you have a variety of media that is available to you. In fact, some people say that channel surfing has become a major sport in itself. Now with that, you find that what media offers today has to have an impact on the way the societal values are formed. And if you look at if you do any content analysis, there are some very prominent communication researchers here. Even among the students, I'm sure that there are some who have interest. There are people in the audience here who have done considerable work in the area of communications research. Unfortunately, I've not had opportunity of doing communications research for the last few years. But if you do any content analysis of the media today, when you do the channel surfing, in a way you do a content analysis, not necessarily in a systematic research sense, you find dominance of a certain kind of content of the media. Entertainment communication obviously is predominant everywhere, and a certain kind of entertainment communication. I'm not sure, frankly, whether that form of communication is entirely for the masses, as we know, if you look at this country of a population of 1 billion, whether the content of the media today is relevant to the needs of the population at large. It caters to those who can afford, who are part of the consumer society, who are part of the affordable market consumer products. So therefore, the content of the media, the form of the media in which it is presented today, is definitely greatly influenced by the market forces. Now, there are certain major concerns that I think we must share as the students of journalism and mass communication. One of the major concerns is the gap that exists between the have and have-nots, media have and have-nots. If media is one of the major sources of both creation and dissemination of knowledge, then if those who have access to media and those who do not have access to media, you can expect that knowledge gap to widen. And if knowledge is the major product and service and industry that is to come in future, then you can expect this gap. In fact, this is one of the major concerns at the international level also, that society is becoming, in fact, the division between the society of have and have-nots is becoming much more sharper. Media seems to be obsessed with the saleable news that sells, whether it's political or news that portrays sex and violence, basically, at the cost of development news. All you have to do is, it is also, in fact, influencing the development of the local language. As students of journalism and mass communication, I hope that you will develop case studies for using media and other forms of communication, printed, electronic, or the combination of thereof, for both education and development. I think this is one of the major concerns of Indira Gandhi National Open University, and I hope as a student you will have opportunity, or at least you will devote some time, some of your practical work experience in developing some case studies in the use of media for development purposes. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Khan. Now I will request Professor Kiran Karnik to make the presentation.
I want to share with you just a few thoughts with regard to the changing scenario, especially in the audiovisual sector, and to see what kinds of changes have been happening and where they might lead us in the years ahead. There have been two major drivers of the changes that have happened, particularly in this decade, in the 90s. The first, as in many other cases and many other fields, is in fact technology. Technology itself acts as a major creator of change in any field, and we've had this most visibly so in the field of audiovisual media, and I'll come back to a few of the factors and what changes have been caused. The other one, and this is surprising because it's not very common, has in fact been the content or the software. This is one area in which the software has driven the expansion and also has created many changes in the way the media is not only perceived and the impact it makes, but also in many ways in how the media is structured, what kind of forms it's taking, and again the implications it might have. First, on the technology. A few of the changes which started earlier but which have really accelerated in the 90s and have caused a great deal of change are firstly the tremendous expansion in satellite broadcasting. This started much earlier, and most of you might recall that in fact India was one of the pioneers when we carried out a satellite instructional television experiment in 1975, using satellites to broadcast programs directly to about 2,500 villages spread all over the country. This was the first real large-scale experiment of what in those days was called direct broadcasting. Subsequently, satellite broadcasting continued to grow around the world and in India through our INSAT system. But in the 90s, it has really exploded. And what has synergistically caused a further growth of that is the proliferation of cable networks. Cable in this country started in a very small way as a means of somebody who was a small entrepreneur putting a few cables and linking together a few households to carry a VCR channel, as it was called, which mostly showed movies, often pirated, not quite legal. But he did this as what you might call a public service, in quotes, to provide movies in your drawing room or your bedroom. You sat and watched, didn't have to go out, didn't have to spend a great deal of money on buying tickets. And between this form of expansion of the audiovisual media and the wide availability of video cassettes, particularly of movies, again very often pirated, through the 80s and early 90s, in fact the film industry and particularly the cinema theatres began to take a big hit. Many of them closed down, a large number of them converted into shopping centres, and there was a fear that the film industry itself may be in trouble. This was one immediate impact of the cable revolution which swept the countries from 1991 onwards. Starting from probably a few thousand households that had cable in 1990, today the estimate is that there are over 20 million households. The number varies between 20 and 22 million. Data is not very good. But let's say 20 million households plus which are connected to cable. Now keep in mind the contrast or the growth of this when you understand how strong this has been. When you compare it with something like telephony, which as we know has been around for over a century worldwide and for many, many, many decades in India. The number of telephones even today is around 16 to 17 million after all these decades of growth. And that gives you a feeling for how fast the cable industry has grown. And this cable, unlike a telephone cable, carries information, and those of you with a technical background will understand the difference. This is really a broadband entry into the house, carrying information in terms of stream of information, which is a few thousand times what the telephone line carries. So potentially, one of the big changes has been that you have this cable coming in, which can carry 30, 40, 50 television channels as it does today, but it can carry any other form of information with that much capacity. The final kind of change I want to touch on in terms of technology is something that's very much in the news and you're all aware of it. DTH, Direct-to-Home. This is something that with a small dish, a little bigger than a dinner plate, maybe 18 inches in diameter, 60, 70 centimeters. Stick it out on your rooftop or even in your balcony or just outside your window as long as you have a clear look angle to a satellite, and you can receive 200 plus channels. The important thing is that this is not just technical hypothesis or feasibility, it is actually happening. In the US, a system like this has been operational for many years. In the UK, they just went through a recent expansion, and today the service there offers 210 channels on one dish. One other important thing which has happened because of satellite broadcasting is that the reach has widened. So you can send a signal and cover not just a country but a very vast area. Now what has this done? One of the important things that has happened is that because of this wide reach, you have so-called global channels. The more known ones, CNN, BBC, there are many others. Sports channels have been a new entrant into this. And the reason is that with this reach, it works again in some form of synergy. With this wide reach, you have a very wide potential market. And with that wide potential market, you can afford to invest more in programming. So you can invest in more attractive programming. I hesitate to say better quality programming, that should be the output, but it's not always better quality. It is just more attractive programming. It may be entertainment with superstars. It may be a lot of animation, excellent for education, but very, very expensive. And now with a wider audience, you can afford it. It may be documentaries, which cost millions of dollars, and you couldn't just afford it for a single country. Now you can carry it to the whole world, and so you can do better. It may be sports events, where the rights are now being sold at phenomenal amounts, and the only reason that they can afford to pay this amount is because they have a worldwide audience, and hopefully some of that money goes back into the sport. So there is a positive feedback cycle there. The net result of this has been that you have more global channels with the reach that they have. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Karnik. I request Dr. R. Sreedher to express his views about how the media can be made more interactive and the participants can take the advantage of this interactiveness. Dr. Sreedher.
After 60 years of broadcasting and education, with cooperation from all the state governments, and with devoting 1 full hour every radio station in the country, we find not a single school or the college opening the radio set at that particular point of time. There are manuals, there are research works carried out years and together, because the radio was only a one-way medium and it was an interactive medium. Now there are so many experiments to make the radio as interactive. The interactiveness can be online or offline. The interactiveness radio brought in the 1950s was that getting 2 students from the same school, and the teacher used to ask the same question, which is given in the book. That was called the interactive radio or the participatory radio. Later on, for unknown reason, live programs are banned in All India Radio, so that again radio became a one-way medium. But we have with us Professor Khan, who was originally sometime in radio as the director of Farm and Home, where he introduced so many new innovations, where radio became participatory interactive for agriculture broadcast, which ultimately gave the radio rice concept, radio rural gatherings, farm school on the air. So the same concept was used by other units in radio, like the health, family welfare programs, which became again a failure because there was no real audience, it was simulated audience. Then it was used for science programs, which to a certain extent became a success, not because of the producers in radio, but because of the other user agencies getting into the field and found here is a medium, cheap medium, economical medium, wherein we can reach the people. So it became a thumping success and radio started using it, and now in Indira Gandhi National Open University we are also doing an interactive experiment in Akashvani Bhopal. So how it's cost effective is that there is a television teacher or a radio teacher coming on the air in a live broadcast mode, and the students can telephone from their residences asking the teacher the questions. Students can ask the television teacher or the radio teacher from their residences. Thanks to Sam Petroda and the technology missions, today we have telephone in at least every corner of the road, if not in every corner of every house. And people will say, the journalists will say, most of the journalists are saying that radio is a dead medium. Who listens to radio? We have kept our radio inside the house. There are so many channels. But still you can find in Bhopal, which is a capital city in the country, and people who have a telephone, we can say is almost middle class or upper middle class, they take the telephone and talk to the teacher on Sundays. Sundays all the channels, television channels gives the best entertainment programs. You have Ramayans, you have Mahabharats, you have Aapki Adalats and Janta Ki Adalats. At that time, we have taken a risk at 10:30 to 11:30. Not only IGNOU students participate, the management program, the small trader, the small businessman, everybody talks to the teacher at this radio station. So radio has got a tremendous scope and it is very cheap, economical, and there are 300 radio stations in the country which can be used. Therefore, we in IGNOU and other open universities would like to make use of this forgotten radio medium or the newborn medium. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Sreedher. May I request Professor Yadav to make the presentation?
I would say the first major change which we are observing is the amount of expansion in the last 50 years in India. The number of titles, the circulation has gone up. You want to have figures, nearly 41,000 titles are registered, with a total combined circulation of about 106 million or about 10 crores. Of these, 4,700 are dailies with about 40 million circulation. So this is the kind of expansion, and the expansion is more noticeable in language journalism, whether it's Hindi, Telugu, Tamil, or whatever the other languages are. The expansion is far more, the growth of the print, the newspaper is far more in the English, far more than the English. Now, the other area which is coming to prominence is that with technologies, the professionalism has increased. Means over the years, earlier we took newspaper as a kind of missions. Now it has become a very well accepted profession, and you students might be joining soon one or the other media. So professionalism in terms of news gathering, editing, product presentations, layout, designs has improved. As a result, we have far more attractive newspaper, and I agree with Karnik, their attractive newspapers may not be very good newspapers. That applies to the print media as well. Particularly noticeable, another trend is decline of the institutions of editor. Across the country, there's a decline of that institution. Earlier, the newspapers were known by the name of the editor. Today, they are known by the name of the proprietor. That's the one major change. And second related issue is that more and more businessmen are coming to the profession as editors, as proprietors. As a consequence, if you go by contents and quality, sometimes one wonders whether 4F dominates the newspapers, and those 4 Fs are fashion, I would say food, finance, and frivolous. Most of the things, Dr. Khan mentioned the issue of agenda setting, but on what issue the media, whether it's electronic or print, agenda are set around. Real issues of the people are left out, and they are nowhere in the picture. Technology helps a great deal, and that technology helps in making kind of monopolistic situation also possible. Now more and more newspapers are multi-editions, published from different centers. Cost in that process, in a way, good development. Cost of news gathering have come down. Cost of production of newspapers have come down. So economically, they're much more viable. But the emphasis on finance has kind of as a tool to make profit as perhaps over-dominating, and that's kind of negative development. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Yadav.